Greetings, vinyl community. This is a response to Sherv's Gimme 10 thread on the subject of duos. And I want to start off with the Indian music concept of the jugalbandi or yugalbandi. And in the Indian classical music that we usually hear, there's just one melody instrument with accompaniment. And the jugalbandi simply means literally entwined twins, so it's duos. And an example is the violin and the sarod, with Ali Akbar Khan, the master of the sarod, and L. Subramaniam on the violin. Another would be this one with Hari Prasad Chaurasia on the bansuri flute, and Shiv Kumar Sharma on the santur, which is like a kind of zither, little box with strings across the top that are played with sticks. And this one is actually called yugalbandi. So on to the proper vinyl duo albums. And I'll start off with one that's a particular favorite for a particular setting in life. This is what I think of as a great Sunday morning or quiet morning album. It's on the ECM label, Ralph Towner and Gary Burton Matchbook from 1974, guitar and vibes duets. Just very calming, peaceful music, good for those early Sunday mornings, good music to be playing while having breakfast. Some tunes that we know from other contexts on here. Icarus in particular is kind of a theme tune or signature tune for Ralph Towner, who's recorded it solo. He's recorded it with Oregon. He recorded it with the Paul Winter Consort. Also Aurora is on here, which was done on one of the early Oregon albums as well. So that's the first. The second, from the British folk world, Martin Carthy and Dave Swarbrick, But Two Came By, an album of mostly traditional British folk songs. Originally released on the Fontana label in 1968, this is the reissue from the 70s on Topic. As you can see, it has been signed by the duo. Next one is a bit of a cheat because it's not actually a duo recording. It's a band, and it's a band that has a single definite leader. But the band also has a guest member who is significant enough that he gets co-credit along with the leader. And this is Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart, Bongo Fury, released in 1976. This is mostly recorded live in Texas, and it really has kind of a Texas feel. This is a hot, sweaty, dusty kind of an album. The opening guitar figure sounds like this could be on a ZZ Top album, although it quickly becomes very fractured and bizarre. So it does not stay in the boogie mode, but there's definitely a strong element there. There's a lot of down and dirty blues on the extended Advanced Romance, also on 200 Years Old, which is one of the studio recordings. There's even a cowboy song, which is Poofter's Froth, Wyoming, Plans Ahead, which is a satirical look on the bicentennial of the USA, which this was recorded in 1975, and the bicentennial was going to be happening the following year, and Zappa and Beefheart were anticipating the commercialization of the event, which certainly did happen. This copy is an Australian pressing, which is slightly different from the American edition. Besides having the title and band name actually printed on the cover, on the American it was just a sticker on the shrink wrap, and there was no text on the cover at all. But the photo is cropped differently. You can see parts of the menu on the wall above Frank Zappa's head, and that reveals that the photo is actually printed backwards, which you can only tell by seeing the print on here that is not included on the American release of the album. Okay, the duo is Andrew Kasdan and Thomas Z. Shepard, producers for the Columbia Masterworks label, and they made this album in 1972, Everything You Always Wanted to Hear on the Moog, but were afraid to ask for. And this consists of 4 pieces, all in a kind of Spanish style, although by French composers, except for one by the Cuban composer Ernesto Lecuona. It's all performed, of course, on the Moog synthesizer. It's in the style of switched on Bach, but a bit more flippant, a bit more pop, a bit sillier. It's also an exercise in why you can't take what you read on Discogs as gospel, because they show a release of this album from 1967. This was 1972. I mean, the title is a riff on the book, Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, but Were Afraid to Ask. That book is from 1969, so they'd have to be very prescient to have released this album in 1967. Probably the best kind of duo is a husband and wife duo. And that's what we have here. Judy Henske and Jerry Yester, Farewell Aldebaran. This is on the Straight label from Frank Zappa and Herb Cohen. And there's the cover picture in a less distorted mode. Judy Henske, well known as a folk singer in the 60s, and Jerry Yester had just been a member of the Lovin' Spoonful, where he replaced Zalyanovsky. This is really delightful acid folk rock, very playful, interesting, deep, definitely bizarre, and fits in on the Straight label with the characters that Zappa signed to his little company. And another, not quite husband and wife, a husband and wife to be, Toya and Fripp, The Lady or the Tiger. And this is the album that they made that basically threw them together, and they were married shortly after this album was made. Toya Wilcox, of course, already had a thriving solo career, although not so well known this side of the Atlantic, but very popular in Britain. And Robert Fripp, of course, the mastermind of King Crimson. This was recorded in 1985 and consists of Toya reading the stories by Frank R. Stockton, The Lady or the Tiger on the A side, and its sequel on the B side, The Discourager of Hesitancy. On the A side, she is accompanied by Fripp himself on Frippertronics, which is his system of electronically sustained guitar, and on the B side, by Fripp's acoustic guitar ensemble, the League of Crafty Guitarists. From 1981, Ronaldo and the Loaf. Ronaldo Malpractice and Ted the Loaf were a British duo who got themselves signed to the Residence Ralph Records label, and this was the first release. Apparently they had had a cassette-only release before this one, but this was their first vinyl album. And it definitely belongs on the Residence label because it's every bit as quirky and strange as the Residence. Very humorous, very fun. Songs for Swinging Larvae. Love that title, too. A band that we think of as a quartet, but at this time, they were a duo, Kraftwerk, Ralph and Florian. Ralph Hutter and Florian Schneider were all that were left of Kraftwerk at this album. This was the album before Autobahn. So it's a bit of a transitional album between the more free-form, avant-garde material that made up the first two Kraftwerk albums and the more focused pop-based pieces that began with the Autobahn album. This definitely has elements of that, of both, but leans a bit more towards the Autobahn side of things. And I absolutely love this back cover picture. I think that's really a delightful setting for them to be making music in. This is a US pressing, and it shows a date of 1975, so this was actually released in the USA after Autobahn, which came out in '74. Finally, one that isn't even music. Proctor and Bergman, TV or not TV? Well, I take it back because there is music on here. They do have some songs. But primarily this is a comedy album by half of the Firesign Theatre. In 1973, the Firesign Theatre had temporarily split, and David Osman and Philip Austin both made solo albums, while Proctor and Bergman stuck together. Phil Proctor and Peter Bergman stuck together and made a series of albums. This was the first in 1973. They went on to make a live album, What This Country Needs, and a third album called Give Us a Break. I think that's all that came out on vinyl. And this is like the classic Firesign albums, this is a basically full-length continuous narrative piece about a public access television station and some kind of strange interference that it is experiencing. So definitely in the vein of the top classic Firesign Theatre albums, with a little bit more of the wackiness. These two were the more wacky side. David Osman was a bit more of the serious side, a bit more the poet, and Phil Austin a bit more the he was the kind of rock guy. He was the one who had the contribution to Firesign Theatre that made them a rock band that just didn't happen to be musicians. That's it. Thanks very much. Be well. Talk with you again. Bye-bye for now.